Hi, strawberries. Welcome back to the Strawberry Patch. Tonight, we're going to slow down, get cozy, and read a few pages together. Tonight, we're going to read The Secret Garden, Chapter 8, The Robin Who Showed the Way. As she looked at the key quite a long time, she turned it over and over and thought about it. As I have said before, she was not a child who has been trained to ask permission or consult her elders about things. All she thought about the key was that if it was the key to the closed garden and she couldn't find out where the door was, she could perhaps open it and see what was inside the walls and what had happened to the old rose trees. It was because it has been shut up so long she wanted to see it. It seemed as if it must be different from other places, and that something strange might have happened to it during 10 years. Besides that, if she liked it and she can go into it every day and shut the door behind her, she can make up some play of her own and play quite alone, because nobody would ever know where she was or would think the door was still locked and the key buried in the earth. The thought of that pleased her very much. Living, as it were, all by herself in a house with 100 mysteriously closed doors and having nothing whatever to do to amuse herself had set her inactive brain to working and was actually awakening her imagination. There is no doubt that a fresh, strong, pure air from the moor had a great deal to do with it, just as giving her appetite and fighting with the wind had stirred her blood. So the same things had stirred her mind. In India, she's always been too hot and languid and weak to care much about anything. But in this place, she was beginning to care and to want to do new things. Already she felt less contrary, though she did not know why. She put the key up in her pocket and walked up and down her walk. No one but herself ever seemed to come there, so she could walk slowly and look at the wall, or rather at the ivy growing on it. The ivy was the baffling thing. Howsoever carefully she looked, she could see nothing but thickly growing glossy dark green leaves. She was very much disappointed. Something of her contrariness came back to her as she paced the walk and looked over it at the tree tops inside. It seemed so silly, she said to herself, to be near it and not be able to get in. She took the key in her pocket when she went back to the house, and she made up her mind that she would always carry it with her when she went out, so that if she ever should find the hidden door, she will be ready. Mrs. Medlock had allowed Martha to sleep all night at the cottage, but she was back at work in the morning with cheeks redder than ever in the best of spirits. I got up at 4 o'clock, she said. Eh, it is pretty on the moor, and the birds getting up and the rabbits scrambling about and the sun rising. I didn't walk all the way. A man gave me a ride in his cart, and I did enjoy myself. She was full of stories of the delight of her day out. Her mother has been glad to see her, and they had got to baking and washing all out of the way. She even made each of the children a dough cake with a bit of brown sugar in it. I had 'em all piping hot when they came in from playing on the moor. The cottage all smelled all nice, clean, hot bake, and there was a good fire, and they just shouted for joy. Our Dickens said our cottage was good enough for a king. In the evening, they all sat around the fire, and Martha and her mother had sewed patches on torn clothes and mended stockings. And Martha had told them about the little girl who has come from India, who has been waited all her life by what Martha called blacks, until she didn't know how to put on her own stockings. Eh, they didn't like to hear about you, said Martha. They wanted to know all about the blacks and the ship you came in. I couldn't tell them enough. Mary reflected a little. I'll tell you a great deal before your next day out, she said, so that you will have more to talk about. I dare say that they would like to hear about the riding on the elephants and camels and about the officers going to hunt tigers. My word, cried delighted Martha. It would set 'em clean off their heads. Would that really do that, miss? It would be the same as a wild beast showed, like we heard they had in New York once. India is quite different from Yorkshire, Mary said slowly, as she thought the matter over. I never thought of that. Did Dickon and your mother like to hear you talk about me? Why, our Dickon's eyes nearly started out of his head. They got the round, answered Martha. But mother, she was put on about your seeming to be all by yourself like. She said, "Hasn't Mr. Craven got no governess for her, no nurse?" And I said, "No, he hasn't. But Mrs. Mullock said he thinks of it, but she says he may think for 2 to 3 years." "I don't want a governess," said Mary sharply. "Mother says you ought to be learning your book by this time. You ought to have a woman to look after you." And she says, "Now, Martha, you just think how you'll feel yourself in a big place like that, wandering all alone and no mother. You do your best to cheer up," she says. I said I would. Mary gave her a long, steady look. "You do cheer me up," she said. "I like to hear you talk." Presently, Martha went out the room and came back with something held in her hands under her apron. "What do you think?" she said with a cheerful grin. "I brought thee a present." "A present!" exclaimed Mistress Mary. "How could a college full of 14 hungry people give anyone a present?" A man was driving across and more pedaling. Martha explained. He stopped his car at our door. He had pots and pans, odds and ends. My mother had no money to buy anything. Just as she was going away, our Elizabeth Ellen called out, "Mother, he's got skipping ropes and red and blue handles." And Mother calls out quite suddenly, "Here, stop, mister. How much are they?" And he says, "Tuppence." And Mother began fumbling in her pockets, and she says to me, "Martha, that has brought me my wages like a good last, and I got 4 places to put every penny. But I've just gone and take the tuppence out to buy that kid a skipping rope." And she bought one, and here it is. She brought it out from under her apron and exhibited it quite proudly. It was strong slender rope with a striped red and blue handle on each end. Mary Lennox has never seen a skipping rope before. She gazed at it with a mystified expression. "What is this for?" she asked curiously. "For?" cried out Martha. "Does that mean they ain't got no skipping ropes in India for all they got elephants and tigers and camels? No wonder most of 'em's black. This is what it's for. Just watch me." And she ran into the middle of the room and, taking a handle in each hand, began to skip and skip and skip, while Mary turned in her chair to stare at her. And the cute faces in the old portrait seemed to stare at her too, and wonder what on earth this common little college had. The impudence and curiosity in Mistress Mary's face delighted her, and she went on skipping and counted as she skipped until she had reached 100. "I could skip longer than that," she said when she stopped. "I skipped as much as 500 when I was 12, but I wasn't as fat then as I am now, and I was in practice." Mary got up from the chair, beginning to feel excited herself. "It looks nice," she said. "Your mother is a kind woman. Do you think I can ever skip like that?" "You just try," urged Martha, handling her skippy rope. "You can't skip 100 at first, but if you practice, you'll mount up. That's what mother says." She says, "Nothing will do her more good than skipping rope. It's the sensiblest toy a child can have. Let 'em play 'em out, fresh air skipping, and stretch their legs and arms and give her some strength in them." It was plain that there was not a great deal of strength in Mrs. Mary's arms and legs when she first began to skip. She was not very clever at it, but she liked it so much that she did not want to stop. "Put on the things and run a skip out the door," said Martha. "Mother said I must tell you to keep the old doors as much as you could, even if it rains a bit, so that it wrap up warm." Mary put on her coat and hat and took her skipping rope over her arm. She opened the door to go out, and then suddenly thought of something and turned back rather slowly. "Martha," she said, "they were your wages. It was your 2 pence, really. Thank you." She said it stiffly because she was not used to thanking people or noticing that they did things for her. "Thank you," she said, and held her head because she did not know what else to do. Martha gave her hands a clumsy little shake, as if she was not accustomed to this sort of thing either. Then she laughed. "Eh, thou art a queer old woman thing," she said. "If that had been our Elizabeth Ellen, thou'd have given me a kiss." Mary looked stiffer than ever. "Do you want me to kiss you?" Martha laughed again. "Nah, not me," she answered. "If that was different, perhaps thou want thyself. But that isn't. Run off and play with thy rope." Mr. Mary felt a little awkward as she went out in the room. Yorkshire people seemed strange, and Martha was rather a puzzle to her. At first she had disliked her very much, and now she did not. The skipping rope was a wonderful thing. She counted and skipped and counted until her cheeks were quite red, and she was more interested than had ever been since she was born. The sun was shining and a little wind was blowing, not a rough wind, one which came in delightful little gust and brought a fresh scent of newly turned earth with it. She skipped round the fountain garden and up one walk and down another. She skipped at last into the kitchen garden and saw Ben Weatherstaff digging and talking to his robin, which was hoping him. She skipped down to walk towards him, and he lifted his head and looked at her with a curious expression. She had wondered if he would notice her. She wanted him to see her skip. Well, he exclaimed, upon my word, perhaps thou a youngin after all, perhaps, that got child's blood in thy veins instead of sour buttermilk. Thy skipped right into thy cheeks, as sure as my name's Ben Weatherstaff. I wouldn't have believed that I can do it. I never skipped before, Mary said. I'm just beginning. I can only go up to 20. Thy keep on, said Ben. Thy shaped well enough for it as a youngin that's lived with heaven. Just see how he's watching thee, jerking his head towards the robin. He followed after thee yesterday. He'll be at it again today. He'll be bound to find out what thy skipping rope is. He's never seen one. Shaking his head at the bird. Thy curiosity will be the death to be something if that doesn't look sharp. Mary skipped round all the garden and round the orchard, resting every few minutes. At length, she went to her own special walk and made up her mind to try to see if she could skip the whole length of it. It was a good long skip, and she began slowly, but before she had gone halfway down the path, she was so hot and breathless that she was obligated to stop. She did not mind much because she was already counted up to 30. She stopped with a little laugh of pleasure, and there, lo and behold, was Robin swinging on a long branch of ivy. He had followed her and greeted her with a chirp. As Mary had skipped towards him, she felt something heavy in her pocket slide against her at each jump, and when she saw the robin, she laughed again. You showed me where these keys were yesterday, she said. You ought to show me where the door today, but I don't believe you know. The robin flew from his swinging spray of ivy onto the top of the wall, and he opened his beak and sang a loud, lovely trill, merely to show off. Nothing in the world is quite as adorable, lovely robin when he shows off, and they are nearly always doing it. Mary Lennox had a great deal about magic in her Aya stories, and she always said that what happened almost at the moment was magic. One of the nice little gusts of winds rushed down the walk, and it was stronger one than the rest. It was strong enough to wave the branches of trees, and it was more than strong enough to sway the straining sprays of untrimmed ivy hanging from the wall. Mary had stepped close to the robin, and suddenly the gust of wind swung aside some loose ivy trails, and more suddenly still she jumped towards it and caught it in her hand. This she did because she had seen something under it, a round knob which had been covered by the leaves hanging over it. It was the knob of a door. She put her hands under the leaves and began to pull and push them aside. Thick as the ivy hung, it nearly all was loose, and swinging curtain, though some had crept over wood and iron. Mary's heart began to thump and her hands to shake a little in her delight and excitement. The robin kept singing and twittering away and tilting his head on one side as if he were excited as she was. What was this under her hands, which was square and made of iron, and which her fingers found a hole in? It was the lock of the door which had been closed 10 years, and she put her hand in her pocket, drew out the key, and found it fitted keyhole. She put the key in and turned it. It took two hands to do it, but it did turn. And then she took a long breath and looked behind her, the long walk to see if anyone was coming. No one was coming. No one ever did come, it seemed. And she took another long breath because she could not help it. And she held back of the swinging curtain of ivy and pushed back the door, which opened slowly, slowly. Then she slipped through it and shut it behind her, and stood with her back against it, looking about her and breathing quite fast with excitement and wonder and delight. She was standing inside the secret garden. Thank you for spending a little time in the strawberry patch with me tonight. I hope this story brought you a little peace. Sleep well, strawberries, and I'll see you in the next chapter.